Well, hello, Nativity Bible heads. It is Dr. Wayne, and it is time for Bible Study Wednesday. We are in the book of 1 Kings tonight, chapter 17. Chapter 17 is a point at which our narrative, which heretofore has been telling us of the doings, mostly the bad doings of the kings of the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom of Israel and Judah. But toward the end of chapter 16, it moved into the time of King Ahab. King Ahab, just as a reminder, well, if you look in chapter 16, the last paragraph of chapter 16, it tells that Ahab, well, verse 30, it says, Ahab, son of Omri, there you have it, did evil in the sight of the Lord more than all who were before him. And look, and as if it had been a life thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat. What was that? What were the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, that he walked in? Baal worship. Remember? Baal worship. What was Baal worship? Baal worship was the religion that existed before Israel got there. And it was a very nature-oriented religion. It was a religion which saw their God as, well, if it were dry, if there wasn't any rain, that means that Baal was dead. And if you're going to get rain again, Baal needs to come back to life. Well, Baal worship was all about the people then doing things to revive Baal. This is the reason why it's referred to as a fertility cult. They would participate in rituals of copulation, if you will. This was a way of bringing back to life Baal. And then what was evidence that Baal would be alive? That the rains would come. This is what was going on. Ahab, the king of Israel, he was the king of the northern kingdom for, it says, 22 years. And the story pauses here to paint us a bigger picture of what was going on there. And we find the ministry of the prophet Elijah introduced. But just as a recap, look at verses 31 through 34 of the previous chapter, verse 16. And as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, son of Nebat, he took as his wife Jezebel, a daughter of King Ethbaal of the Sidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. So basically, blatantly, the narrator just straight out says, Ahab was a Baal worshiper, period. Nothing much worse that you could say about a king than that. Verse 32, he erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria. Yeah, remember Samaria was the capital city of the northern kingdom. Ahab also made a sacred pole, that's an Asherah. That was a pole to the goddess consort of Baal, okay? Ahab did more to provoke the anger of the Lord, the God of Israel, than had all the kings of Israel who went before him in his days. Okay, well, you don't need to read any more of that, but that gives you the picture, yes? Enter Elijah, okay? Chapter 17. Now, Elijah, the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead, said to Ahab. Now, Elijah had never been mentioned before. Elijah's, the stories about Elijah start here, and quite frankly, they are an insertion into the narratives of the kings. Remember that in our Protestant way of talking about these narratives, we inaccurately use the word, oh, these are the historical books. No. In the Jewish way of understanding it is that they are the former prophets. And that's what this is. That's why it is because they are the stories of the prophets as they interacted with the kings of the day. Elijah is one of these. You're not going to find a book of Elijah, are you? No. Why? Because Elijah was one of the former prophets. The latter prophets, those are the ones that have the prophets with the books with the names like Ezekiel and Jeremiah and Isaiah and Hosea and Joel and Amos and Micah and Habakkuk and all of those guys, right? Okay. Now Elijah, the Tishbite, by the way, if you were from Tishbe, you too would be a Tishbite. Elijah is a Tishbite. It's the only place we see that mentioned in Scripture. The word Tishbe literally means of the settlers, like the place of the settlers. Maybe it's not, we don't even know if it's actually a name of a city or if it's just a name of a place. But it's not far from this little brook called the Wadi Cherith. The word wadi is Hebrew for a little stream or a brook, a babbling brook, you know, that kind of thing. Wadis were notoriously dry in the drought season, and the only time they would have water is during the rainy season, okay? Good to know, right? Well, hold on to that. It's coming up. Now Elijah the Tishbite of Tishbe in Gilead said to Ahab, "As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, before whom I stand, there shall be neither dew nor rain these years, except by my word." What did I just get done telling you about Baal worship? Ahab had sold out to Baal worship. In the world of Baal worship, Baal controlled the weather. Baal controlled prosperity. Baal controlled the crops. Baal controlled the growing seasons and the dying seasons. In this story of Elijah, what we're getting is our narrator saying, well, even though Ahab had sold out, guess what? God is going to do something to prove this was a bad bet. As the Lord, the God of Israel lives, this is Elijah talking to the king, there shall neither be dew nor rain these years, except by my word, okay? Not Baal. What is going on here is the narrator is setting us up for some confrontations that we'll see in chapter 18, that's next week, between Elijah, the prophet of the Lord, of Yahweh, and the prophets of Baal. This is like, if you will, an initial salvo into this big battle that's going to come up, okay? His announcement here is that, okay, you're gonna have drought, but I tell you what, it's not because of what you think, it's gonna be because of the Lord. This is the essence of what Elijah is doing. He's throwing down the gauntlet saying, I'm going to show you the power of the Lord, okay? You think it's Baal, I'm gonna show you otherwise. The Lord, the God of Israel, is the Lord of life. This Baal God that you think is dead and has to come back to life again to give you rain is of no consequence. It's nothing. It's your illusion. It's something that you've made up. It's not really a God, okay? That's the kind of the where he's going with all of this, okay? Verse 2. The word of the Lord came to him saying, now this is Elijah, go from here and turn eastward and hide yourself by the Wadi Cherith. I told you what that is, a little brook, right? Not far from Tishbe, which is east of the Jordan. You shall drink from the wadi, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. So in the midst of this drought, the Lord gives Elijah an instruction of where he is to receive sustenance. And this theme of the ravens feeding him, do you remember when Jesus went into the wilderness during that temptation of his? And it says that the wild animals ministered to him, that he was actually with the animals, and that he received some sort of sustenance or support from the animal. This is a trope, if you will, of storytelling where the prophet of God, the man of God, in a world of scarcity, is provided for by God through the wildlife. This is that same trope here, okay? Verse 4, you shall drink from the wadi, and I have commanded the ravens to feed you there. Verse 5, so he went and did according to the word of the Lord. He went and lived by the Wadi Cherith, which is east of the Jordan. The ravens brought him bread and meat in the morning, and bread and meat in the evening, and he drank from the wadi. In that day and age, if you were having meat twice a day, you're living pretty high on well, I was going to say the hog, but that's not exactly a kosher reference now, is it, for our friends here in this part of the world? But you're living pretty, that's a sumptuous meal, okay? That's some high living if you're getting meat twice a day. Verse 7, but after a while, the wadi dried up because there was no rain in the land. Remember, the narrator is setting us up for a demonstration of the power of God. So this is an illustration of how the prophet is sustained at the beginning. How long is this supposed to last? Well, it's going to be, you know what? It didn't tell us, did it? Jesus, when he referred to this story in Luke chapter 4, says that it lasted 3.5 years. I don't know if it says that. Oh yeah, in chapter 18, it's going to say in the 3rd year. So it's a 3-year drought, basically, 3-ish years, right? And the verse 17, or chapter 17, is giving us 3 vignettes, 3 pictures of how things went during those 3 years. So we don't want to see these events as happening like boom, 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 right after another, like day 1, day 2, day 3. No, we're talking about years and months here, okay? Total of 3 years by the time we get to chapter 18. Verse 8. Then the word of the Lord came to him, saying, go now to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon. Now, Sidon, if you remember, Sidon had just gotten mentioned in the passage where mentioned Ahab, who had married Jezebel, and Jezebel was worshiping Baal, and had gotten Ahab to worship Baal. And so Sidon, Zarephath, isn't that far from Sidon. So this is a Baal. This is Baal's territory, okay, Zarephath. Go now to Zarephath, which belongs to Sidon, and live there. Go live amongst the Baal worshipers. For I have commanded a widow there to feed you. Oh, well, if there's a widow there to feed him, that means she's not going to be of the same faith as Elijah. No, Remember when Jesus referred to, when Jesus in Luke chapter 4, he was preaching in the synagogue, his home synagogue, and he says something about how a prophet is not without honor except his own country, and then he uses as an illustration Elijah. Well, look at Elijah. When there was a drought in Israel, where did God send him? To the Baal-worshipping widow in Zarephath. They didn't like that. Jesus also referred to another healing where a non-Israel person was healed by Nathan the prophet. Jesus got in trouble when he said all this. They didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to be reminded of the fact that, oh, God truly shows no partiality. God really is not limited by ethnicity. Well, this is where that story comes from. Elijah being sent to the widow in Zarephath. For I have commanded a widow there to feed you. So the Lord is taking care of Elijah even in the midst of the scarcity that exists. It is as though, remember the kind of like the attitude of Jesus in his ministry when, like for example, the anointing of his feet, and somebody yells out, well, wait a second, all that oil, that could have been used for and sold and the money given to the poor. And Jesus says, calm down, it's going to be okay, this kind of a thing. Now, when we see our prophet Elijah acting here, he is acting with the attitude of that everything is going to be okay. So he's not going to be acting in a way that we think like, well, that isn't very hospitable. That isn't very noble. That's not very minister-like. Well, this is not a story to demonstrate that. This is a story to illustrate the power of the word of the Lord, as opposed to the power of Baal, which is no power. That's the point of the story. That's what is being emphasized. That's the reason why we're not going to see the prophet acting graciously, if you will. So let's read on. All right, verse 10. So he set out and went to Zarephath. When he came to the gate of the town, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and said, bring me a little water in a vessel so that I may drink. Bossy. As she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, bring me a morsel of bread in your hand. He's just like living in a world of abundance. It's like, hey, there's all this stuff around, just might as well. But she said, as the Lord your God lives, she seems to recognize him as a prophet of the Lord. We don't know how. But she said, as the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked and only a handful of meal in a jar and a little oil in a jug. I am now gathering a couple of sticks so that I may go home and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die. It kind of sounds like she's saying that she's going to prepare the sticks to eat. I have a feeling the sticks are for a fire to bake something with what she had left. I don't think she's planning on eating the sticks. But do you get the contrast? Elijah is working from a space of plenitude, and she is living from a space of scarcity. This is the contrast we're supposed to be seeing. Verse 13, Elijah said to her, do not be afraid. Go and do as you have said. But first, make me a little cake of it. So she was planning on going to go ahead and do this already, but he's saying, yeah, go ahead and do that, but make a little bit for me first. But first make me a little cake of it and bring it to me. And afterwards make something for yourself and your son. I've heard this passage could be used as a tithing passage, if you will. It's like, everything that we have actually does belong to the Lord, but if we're acting out of a space of abundance, then we're willing to give God a slice off the top. Yes, but first make me a little cake of it, and bring it to me. And afterwards, make something for yourself. So it's like, I just want just a little bit of it. That's not really the whole lesson here, but it could be used for a lesson like that. Remember, where's Elijah going with all this? The direction he is going is he wants to teach her. He wants to teach. Okay, there's 3 stories in chapter 17. It is establishing credibility, if you will, street cred of the prophet as a prophet of God, because we're going to see more of that in chapter 18. Remember, what was going on here? Ahab was king of Israel. Ahab had sold out to Baal worship. Elijah is going to be, spoiler alert, in chapter 18, he's going to be a hero against the Baal worshiping prophets. This is establishing his credentials, his credibility. Verse 14, for thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, the jar of meal will not be emptied, and the jug of oil will not fail until the day that the Lord sends rain on the earth. Again, that little gut punch to Baal worshipers, which is that, the Lord will send rain to the earth, not Baal. She went and did as Elijah said, so that she, as well as her household, ate for many days. Abundance in the wake of scarcity. The jar of meal was not emptied, neither did the jug of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by Elijah. This little incident here of the feeding, it's very likely that this is the stimulus to the feeding stories that we see Jesus do in the Gospels. When in the Gospel of John, it's where he takes a few loaves of bread and some fish, and it's enough for everybody. And then, in Mark, that deed of power that Jesus performed with the feeding is in line with, that's what you do if you want to establish your credibility as a spokesman for the Lord. You feed people. You take what's scarce and you turn it into something that's abundant. This is what Elijah is doing. This is an evidence for that kind of behavior for the man of God, to make that which is scarce abundant. Verse 17. After this, now remember, these things are not happening right at boom, 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 boom. No, it's after this. It just means like whenever. I think there's got to be lots of months, if not maybe even a year or so. But look at this, verse 17. After this, the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, became ill. His illness was so severe that there was no breath left in him. It could mean that he was totally dead. It could just mean that he was very near death. It really matters not in the story, quite frankly. Verse 18. She then said to Elijah, "What have you against me, O man of God? You have come to me to bring my sin to remembrance and to cause the death of my son." In her world, the presence of Elijah had brought the attention of God to her, and this illness, this fate of her son, she interprets as, I've been found out that I'm wrong and bad, and this is now the punishment I'm getting. Yeah, that's where she lies. That's where she is. That's why she's upset. Verse 19. But he said to her, "Give me your son." He took him from her bosom, carried him into the upper chamber where he was lodging, and laid him on his own bed. The woman may have been of some means, if you think about it. In the earlier story, she was this widow and her son and all of that, and like she was about to, and now it sounds like she's kind of a well-heeled person. I mean, she's considered the mistress of the house. You're not considered the mistress of a house unless there's people, and there's it's got to be a big place. If you're just living in a hut with your kid, you're not considered the mistress of the house. And notice that he carries the boy into the upper chamber where he was alive. It's like, Who has an upper room? You gotta have something if you got an upper room. If you got a guest room, yeah, exactly. So many believe that possibly this woman is not the same woman that we heard of before. Maybe it is, but it certainly looks like the picture has changed, if you will, with regard to her means. Okay? All right. Verse 20. He cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, have you brought calamity even upon the widow with whom I am staying by killing my son, her son?" This is a great illustration of how the prophet, even though he's doing the Lord's work and he's following the instructions of the Lord, he still has a moment of like, he's like saying to God, after everything else, he's like, really? Now I got to deal with this? What's up with that? Illustrates something very important about the spiritual life, and that is this. Our experiences of frustration, our experiences of WTF, God, really, it's all valid. This is a part of the human experience, okay? This is a part of the experience. What does it look like to be a disciple? This is a part of that picture. Being obedient to the word and also saying, really? Now I got this? That's just a part of the whole package, if you will. Okay, he cried out, verse 21. Then he stretched himself upon the child 3 times and cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, let this child's life come into him again." And this is a practice that sometimes people believe that if you were to lay a living body were to lay over a dead body, that it would there would be like this transference thing. So it's kind of like I can't think of a word, an activity. Oh, there's a fancy word for it, and I can't think of it. Where it's like it's a demonstrative type of a thing, of an action. All right. Remember when Jesus when he brought some guy's sight back to life one time? What did he do? He spit in the dirt and he made some mud and he smeared it on the guy's. These were things that were done. They are histrionics, if you will. We have histrionics, do we not? Like what the priest does, what we do with our hands and all of that when we cross ourselves. Baptism, that's an example of that. Kneeling, all of this stuff. Histrionics, it's a valid expression. It's not magic, but it is a valid expression of faith. Okay, here we go. Verse 22, the Lord listened to the voice of Elijah. You get that? The Lord listened to the voice of Elijah. The life of the child came into him again, and he revived. Did you notice that the Lord we never receive anything from the narrator anyway, that the Lord told Elijah, "You must revive this boy." No, he just took it as a part of himself that was his job because of his role as the prophet of God's servant. A lesson for all of us, yes? The Lord listened to the voice of Elijah. The life of the child came into him, and he revived. Verse 23, Elijah took the child, brought him down from the upper chamber into the house, and gave him to his mother. It's kind of the narrator didn't really have to say all that, but the idea here is we're building up to a grand finale, if you will. Then Elijah said, "See, your son is alive." Remember how distraught she was? Well, this is his opportunity to totally turn the tables on that. This is the essence of the kind of God that the Lord is. Remember, in the face of Baal worship, in the face of the fact that people thought that drought was because Baal died, and the only way it could come back again is if Baal were revived. The word of the Lord is being touted here as this is the true power in the world. The Lord of Israel is the Lord of life. And death is going to be here. Death is going to be here. Death is never going to stop being here. Death is something that seems to be pervasive. Yes, and the Lord of life says death isn't the end. This is like a resurrection kind of a motif, if you will. Verse 24, last verse. So the woman said to Elijah, now I know that you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord is in your mouth is truth. Do you remember? You remember at the end of Mark's gospel, not at the very end, but toward the end, when Jesus had been crucified, there's a Roman soldier standing right by, played by John Wayne in the movie, seriously, where he says, looking at the dead Jesus on the cross, where he says, truly, this man was, I think he says the Son of God or something. I think he says the Son of God. This is that kind of a thing where the voice of a ethnically not Jewish, ethnically not a part of the God of Israel, the in group, somebody from the out group, somebody from outside seeing the truth in who Jesus was. Well, this woman who is, from Zarephath of Sidon, Baal, she's in Baal country, okay? Truly, now I know you are a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth. The purpose of these stories is to establish the credibility of this Elijah in the face of the Baal worship. We're going to get more of that in chapter 18, but our narrator has got to do this, give us these stories to set us up for what Elijah is about, how it is that he relates to God, how it is that he responds to God, how does he hear God, how does he do God's bidding. And we're going to get to see how that all comes to a head in the big battle. I think it's on Mount Carmel in chapter 18. So join us next week for more of the exciting ministry of the prophet Elijah as we look at 1 Kings chapter 18. Until then, peace.